off-road, not too much off-road, maybe to your weekender, wherever, something with all-wheel drive is essential and 213 millimeters of ground clearance. What about a Subaru Outback? New Outback is a brand new platform, brand new car, everything's new. A couple of the engines have been dropped. There's no longer the 6-cylinder or the diesel. That was only 6% of all Outback and Liberty sales. Also gone is the Liberty. They're not bringing that to Australia anymore. That was also due to slow sales. Outback comes in 3 models, Outback, Outback Sport and Outback Touring, for $39,990, $44,490 and $47,990 respectively. We've actually achieved more or less the claimed fuel consumption too of a combined 7.3 litres per 100 kilometres, with as low as 6 litres per 100 kilometres on the highway. Subaru also claims that there's 168 grams per kilometre of CO2, but they say real world conditions might vary, and that means that you might have a lead foot. Fuel tank is 63 litres, and all Outbacks come with the Lineartronic CVT. It's not an automatic transmission I'm particularly fond of, but it's your only choice. There's no manual or full automatic. There's a few other things that I want to point out as well. For a start, these really clever lights. They turn with the steering wheel, and that's a feature you can turn off in the menu inside. And on top of the windscreen are the stereo cameras. This is Generation 4 EyeSight. And EyeSight runs a whole lot of Subaru's safety features like the autonomous emergency braking and the smart cruise control. The side view is kind of slick. I particularly like the roof racks, which add a little bit of chunkiness to it. As I said, there's 213 millimeters of ground clearance. The wheels and tyres, they're brand new, and there's this kind of plastic, these sacrifice pieces, which if you were to go a little bit of bush bashing would tend to take more of the knocks than the actual paintwork. Also, it makes the car look a little bit slimmer. So despite the fact that this is a fairly chunky lassie, I think it looks pretty slim. Back you can see the shark fin aerial and the little bit of an overhang over the rear window with the upper stoplight. It's electric, of course, which gives access to a very spacious cargo area. The cargo cover can be retracted completely or can go to an upper position if you want to store something taller underneath. But I think most of you will just put it out of the way, and you can take it out if you want to. The seats go down 60-40, and there's 2 ISOFIX points there and 3 child restraint points. There's a release lever for the back seats either side, a tether point, and a neat bag holder, and there's one of those either side. There's another little area for bits and bobs and a power outlet. Like all Subarus, the doors open nice and wide, and with the seat set for me, there's plenty of space inside. There's a map pocket for people that still use maps, and the center console in this top touring model has the seat heating controls for the rear outboard seats and 2 USB chargers. Inside is where I think this Subaru is particularly successful. I want to point out first of all that the old upper menu system that used to be up here is gone, and all of the features that were included in the upper menu system and the driver's multifunction display are now contained here in the central screen. When you've got your phone plugged in, you'll have CarPlay displaying here as well, but there's an upper section that you can scroll through for different information. I like to have it on my radio, like so, and you'll notice there's DAB radio as well as Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Often used controls like air conditioning have permanent controls, and you press each of those to get a finer control such as vent positions and so forth. The syncing is located each side. There's a button here and a button there, and the sync controls are located within. There's a button for car controls, and here's where you'll find X mode. So the X mode button is gone from the center console. There's almost nothing on the center console but the camera button and the parking brake button and the gear shifter. So you can fettle your X mode controls in the main menu, along with other controls like driver assistance, speed assistance and so forth. Going back to the main menu, there's a settings button. There's also a car section in that, And they're different controls for things like eyesight and so forth. You go into eyesight and there's the various things that you can turn on and off. So now there's just a couple of physical buttons, the climate control temperature, and the hazard flasher. The driver's instruments, a little bit disappointing. There's no heads-up display, and the multi-function display really now only contains basic information. There's 2 memory positions for the driver's seat, and this Subaru is so clever that there's a little I-beam here that scans you when you get in. It knows you and it sets the seats for you, for your particular face. So you could have the one key with 3 family members driving, and the Subaru will welcome each person individually, so long as they're in the driver's seat, and adjust the seat and mirrors to what they like. I think that's just amazing. Other controls on the steering wheel, which are backlit by the way, include SI drive, which varies between sport and intelligent. So for intelligent, think economy. That's what it's mainly aimed for. These buttons used to control the memory functions on the center display, but now they're just relegated to scrolling through basic information. This model, of course, has the sunroof, small overhead console, and some natty bins, including a clever little bin for the passenger's phone. Also in the front, there are USB ports and a generous center console bin. The handbrake releases the second you put it into drive, and the system is now in sport mode, because sport mode is best. The other thing that you'll notice about the CVT is that unlike most manufacturers, this one allows the CVT to step up. In other words, it behaves like a normal transmission. I don't know why they don't just put a normal transmission in and be done with it. On this country lane, the ride is fairly smooth, and the suspension is incredibly sophisticated. For a relatively inexpensive car, there's McPherson struts at the front and double wishbones at the back, and it gives you really good control on tight bends. The all-wheel drive system is symmetrical, which means the wheels on both sides of the car are doing the same thing. Power can be shunted from the front to the rear and vice versa, as the Subaru sees fit. The other clever thing is that there's traffic sign recognition done through the eyesight cameras. If you go into a school zone, the camera realizes that you're in a school zone and will put both speed signs in your speed recognition area in the multifunction display. And the one that's the timed one will have a little clock next to it, so that you'll know that you don't have to actually do that speed zone unless you're in the speed zone time, which I think is very important. Steering, very light, even in sport mode. In fact, all of the controls are drive-by-wire, including the accelerator, which means it's all driven through a computer. And that's why this car has so much control over what you do. There's active blind spot monitoring, active cruise control, there's basic lane keeping assist, and that will just stop you from wandering outside the lanes, and it comes up on your center display. And it just has a couple of line markings, and when it's active, they're white. When it's not active, they're grey. Once you turn the active cruise control on though, the lane centering takes over. You can see now we're stopped at traffic lights. I've activated the auto vehicle hold, which holds your brakes at a set of lights and releases when you put your foot on the accelerator. Also in this menu, which is a bane of my life, is the auto engine cutoff at lights. The other thing this menu allows you to do is to set how enthusiastic you want the cruise control to be. So when you pull out into another lane from slow moving traffic, this will give you a more energetic takeoff. We've tested all 3 cars over the last few weeks, and the thing that's been most startling to me is the fact that there's very little difference between the bottom one and the top one. There's nicer seat coverings in the top one, but equipment-wise, they're all very well equipped. One thing I really do want to note though is that there is a definite lack of power, especially when you're overtaking. The 6-cylinder seemed to have much more oomph, and there's not a turbo option for the 4-cylinder. That was the eyesight telling me I was coming up too fast on the car in front. The good thing about most Subarus now is they've got automatic braking both forward and in reverse. So yesterday I was trying to reverse into a space. It was a fairly tight space and I wanted to go close to the wall, but the Subaru simply wouldn't let me. It said no. And the other thing about that little monitor that welcomes you is that it also monitors where your eyes are. And if it thinks you're not keeping your eyes on the road, it gives you a really terse warning. The same thing goes for if it thinks your hands aren't on the wheel. It's one of those cars that, unless you're a head-banging chav from the council estate, you know, the kind that wears the genuine imitation Burberry cap, if it's a real one, they've nicked it, this car is for you. That's all for Subaru Outback. If you've liked the film, hit like, leave a comment, but above all, just there to subscribe.